At 62 years old, I was fixing a leaky faucet in a cramped Boston apartment when the old man in the wheelchair stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. It was a Wednesday afternoon in October, and I'd been doing handyman work for 6 months just to keep the lights on in my studio. The building superintendent had called me about a maintenance emergency on the 3rd floor, and I figured it would be another quick $50 job. But when Mr. Harrison opened the door, his face went pale, and his hands started shaking on the wheelchair armrests. "Dear God," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're Michael Chen's son, aren't you?" I froze with my toolbox in hand, confused and honestly a little concerned this elderly man was having some kind of episode. "Sir, I'm just here about the faucet. Are you feeling all right?" Michael Chen, Boston, 1962. His eyes filled with tears. You have his face. The exact same eyes, that same strong jaw. I'd know those features anywhere. My father's name hit me like a punch to the gut. Nobody ever talked about him. He died in a construction accident when I was barely a year old, and my mother had spent the next 40 years avoiding any mention of him before she passed away 5 years ago. "How do you know my father's name?" I asked, my heart suddenly racing. "Because I was his business partner, Mr. Harrison said, reaching toward me with a trembling hand. "We started a construction company together in 1962. Your father owned 50%. William, please, you need to come inside. What I'm about to tell you will change everything." I should have finished the faucet job and left. I had 2 more appointments that afternoon, and the last thing I needed was to get involved in some confused elderly man's fantasy. But something in his voice, the way he said my father's name with such certainty, made me step through that doorway. His apartment was modest but immaculately kept, and every wall was covered with framed photographs and documents. He wheeled himself to a filing cabinet and pulled out a black and white photograph with shaking hands. 2 young men in hard hats stood in front of construction equipment, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera like they owned the world. "That's your father and me." June 15th, 1962. The day we signed the incorporation papers for Chen Harrison Construction. I stared at the photograph. The man on the left looked exactly like me at 25. Same dark hair, same build, same slight scar above the left eyebrow that I'd gotten from a childhood fall. "My mother never mentioned any business," I said quietly. "Because we just started," Mr. Harrison explained, his words tumbling out urgently. "We were both foremen at different sites, both immigrant sons trying to make something of ourselves. Mike was Chinese-American, I was Irish-American, and we were tired of working for other people. We pooled everything we had, $50,000 each, and bought equipment and a small lot in Dorchester." He pulled out yellowed incorporation papers, and there it was, Chen Harrison Construction, Incorporated 50-50 partnership between Michael Chen and Patrick Harrison, dated June 1962. "We got our first contract in August," Patrick continued. "A small residential development, 12 houses. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Then on September 3rd, your father was killed when scaffolding collapsed at another site where he was consulting." His voice broke. He was 26 years old. "Your mother was 8.5 months pregnant with you." I went to the funeral, he said, wiping his eyes. "Your mother, Grace, was devastated. When I tried to talk to her about the company, about Mike's share, she screamed at me, said she never wanted to hear about construction or business or any of it. She moved away right after you were born, and I lost track of her." "So you just kept the company?" I asked, not sure what I was feeling. "I kept it for both of us," Patrick said firmly. He wheeled to his desk and started pulling out folders, decades worth of documents. Every contract, every project, every decision. I asked myself what Mike would want. I put his 50% in a trust and hired investigators to find you. Your mother had changed her name from Chen to her maiden name, Green. She disappeared into Providence, then Hartford, moving every few years. My investigators could never track you down. But the company," he continued. Opening folder after folder, it grew. We got bigger contracts. By 1975, we were building commercial projects. By 1985, we were one of the major developers in Boston. By 2000, We owned significant real estate across the city. He showed me bank statements, property deeds, lease agreements. My head was spinning. "Mr. Harrison, why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm 88 years old, William. I had a stroke last year. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months left." He grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Your father's share of Chen Harrison Development Group, as of today, is worth $417 million. My legs gave out. I sat down hard on his couch, my toolbox clattering to the floor. "That's not possible." "It's very possible. We own 14 commercial buildings in downtown Boston, 3 residential complexes in Cambridge, and we're the primary landlord for the Seaport District development. The tech companies moving in have made the property values skyrocket." I couldn't breathe. 6 months ago, I'd been a successful architect with my own small firm. I'd spent 35 years building a reputation for sustainable, community-focused design. Then my ex-wife, Caroline, married the billionaire real estate developer Richard Ashford, and they'd systematically destroyed my life with false accusations of bribery and code violations. They'd blacklisted me from every architecture firm in New England. I'd lost my business, my home, my reputation, everything. Caroline had sent me a text the day I took my first handyman job. "Enjoy being nobody, William. You were always too small for the life I wanted." Now I was staring at documents that said I was worth more than the man who'd destroyed me. "William," Patrick said gently, "there's something else you need to know. Ashford Properties has been our largest commercial tenant for 12 years. His corporate headquarters, the Ashford Tower, sits on our land, Lot 23 in the financial district." The room started spinning. "Richard Ashford rents from us?" "From you now. I'm transferring my shares to you. 50% was always meant to be yours, but now I'm giving you my 50% too. You'll own everything." Patrick pulled out a specific lease agreement. "And William, look at this clause. Your father insisted we include it in every contract. Any tenant convicted of fraud, bribery, or unethical business practices can have their lease terminated with 60 days' notice." Mike wanted honest businesses on our land. He believed developers had a responsibility to the community. I thought about my daughter Jennifer, who'd postponed her wedding because I couldn't help with costs anymore. About my son David, who'd offered to take out loans he couldn't afford. About the humiliation of doing handyman work, while my former colleagues whispered and avoided eye contact. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months, "I think it's time Richard Ashford met his new landlord." Patrick smiled, tears running down his weathered face. "Your father would be so proud, William. You survived what would have broken most men." "I haven't survived yet," I said. "But Richard Ashford is about to learn what it feels like when everything you built sits on someone else's foundation." 6 months earlier, I'd had it all mapped out. 35 years in architecture had taken me from a junior draftsman to running Chen Design Associates, a boutique firm specializing in sustainable urban development. My work had won awards. I'd been featured in Architectural Digest. My projects dotted Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline, each one designed to serve the community, not just maximize profit. The divorce from Caroline had been final for 12 years, and honestly, I was better off without her. She'd been an interior designer when we met, talented but always chasing the next wealthy client, the next social connection. When our kids graduated college, she'd made it clear I was holding her back. "You're too focused on your little community projects," she'd said during one of our final arguments. "When are you going to think bigger, William?" But I liked my life. Jennifer was a social worker in Dorchester, helping immigrant families navigate the system. David was a public defender in Roxbury, fighting for people who couldn't afford legal representation. They'd both inherited my belief that success meant service, not just money. We had dinner together twice a month at my brownstone in the South End. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine, paid off after 20 years of mortgage payments. Then came the New England Developers Association Gala in April. I was there because one of my community centers had won an innovation award. I was standing with my team, actually enjoying myself, when Richard Ashford approached with a woman on his arm. "William Chen," Richard boomed in that voice that commanded rooms full of investors. "I wanted you to meet my fiancée properly." The woman turned, and my blood ran cold. Caroline stood there in a designer gown that probably cost more than I made in a month, diamonds at her throat, that familiar calculating smile on her face. "Hello, William," she said sweetly. "It's been too long." "Caroline's been telling me all about your history together," Richard said, his hand possessive on her waist. "Small world, isn't it? Your ex-wife becoming part of the Ashford family." My team stood frozen around me. My associate Maria shot me a concerned look. I forced a smile. "Congratulations to you both. We should have dinner sometime," Caroline said. "All of us, like adults. I'd love to hear how the kids are doing." The way she said the kids like she hadn't missed 12 years of their lives made my jaw clench, but I kept my composure. "They're doing great. Excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with." I walked away, but I could feel her eyes on me the rest of the night. Maria found me on the terrace later. "Boss, you okay? That looked rough." "Ancient history, Maria." "I'm fine. If you say so, but be careful. That woman looked at you like she was planning something." Maria was more right than she knew. Over the next weeks, Caroline started appearing everywhere. She'd show up at city planning meetings I attended, sitting next to Richard, whispering in his ear while staring at me. She'd drop by sites where I was consulting, claiming Richard was interested in the project. She attended building commission hearings where my designs were being reviewed. "Dad, something's wrong," Jennifer said during one of our dinners. "You look exhausted." "Just work stress, sweetheart." "Mom is marrying Richard Ashford." David set down his fork. "Dad, that's your ex-wife and your biggest competitor." "It's fine. I just need to stay professional." "Dad, you need to document everything," David said in his lawyer voice. "This feels like trouble coming." My mother would have seen it coming. Grace Chen had been suspicious of people with too much charm and too little conscience. She'd raised me alone after my father died, working 2 jobs as a seamstress in Providence's garment district, putting me through school, never complaining. She died 5 years ago from lung cancer, leaving me a box of my father's things and a warning. "The world isn't always fair, William," she'd said in those final weeks. "But people with integrity always have something that money can't buy. Don't lose that." Looking back now, I should have listened to David. I should have seen the trap Caroline and Richard were setting. But I believed in the system, in hard work, in the idea that doing good work was enough protection. I was wrong. The destruction of my life happened in exactly 72 hours, and it started with a phone call at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning. "William, we need you at the city building inspector's office immediately," the voice said. It was Thomas Bradford, the chief building inspector, and his tone made my coffee taste like ash. The meeting room felt like an execution chamber. Bradford sat across from me with 2 attorneys I didn't recognize, and a stack of documents that looked like an indictment. "There's been a serious allegation," Bradford said, sliding papers toward me. 3 of your recent projects, the Mattapan Community Center, the Dorchester Housing Complex, and the Jamaica Plain Library renovation. We've received evidence that you paid bribes to inspectors to approve code violations." "That's absolutely false," I said, my hands starting to shake. "Every project was built to code, overcode actually. I have all the documentation. We have bank records showing wire transfers from accounts linked to your firm to inspectors who approved your projects," one of the attorneys said. "We have email communications discussing these payments. We have testimony from 2 inspectors who've agreed to cooperate." "Let me see those bank records," I demanded. "Those aren't my accounts. They trace back to shell companies registered to your firm," Bradford said. "Mr. Chen, if you cooperate now, agree to voluntarily surrender your architecture license and pay restitution, we can avoid criminal charges." "Criminal charges for something I didn't do?" I stood up. "I want my lawyer. Right now." Bradford's expression didn't change. "That's your right. But you should know that Richard Ashford's legal team has already filed a complaint with the state licensing board. They're alleging a pattern of code violations across multiple Ashford properties where you consulted. Structural issues, safety violations, all hidden through bribery." The threat was clear. Fight this, and Richard would bury me under an avalanche of accusations. "I'm calling my son," I said, pulling out my phone. "Be aware," the other attorney said, "that David Chen has just started at the public defender's office." It would be unfortunate if his employer learned his father was under investigation for corruption. They might question his judgment. They were threatening my son's career. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. David arrived within an hour, and I watched my boy turn into the fighter I'd raised him to be. "My father is invoking his right to counsel," David announced. "This meeting is over. You'll communicate through me from this point forward." But by Wednesday, it was clear this wasn't just a legal problem. The Boston Globe received an anonymous tip about the investigation. By afternoon, my name was connected to words like corruption, bribery, and unsafe buildings. My phone exploded with former clients demanding answers. The Architectural Review Board suspended my license pending investigation. The walk of shame out of my office, carrying a box of personal items while Maria and my team watched with tears in their eyes, was the longest of my life. Thursday brought the structural engineers. 6 of them showed up at the Dorchester housing complex, supposedly finding critical structural flaws that I'd hidden through bribery. The building was immediately condemned. 43 families evacuated. The news cameras were already there, filming the residents carrying their children out while reporters shouted questions about the corrupt architect who endangered lives. "Dad, what's happening?" Jennifer sobbed over the phone. "The news is saying you endangered families. That's not you. It's a mistake, sweetheart. We'll fix this." But by Friday evening, it was clear this was no mistake. Every architecture firm in New England had received a detailed report from Ashford Properties about my ethical violations and pattern of dangerous practices. 20 years of relationships evaporated in 24 hours. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid me. Professional organizations quietly removed my name from directories. The text from Caroline came Friday at midnight. "Enjoy being nobody, William. You were always too small for my world. Richard sends his regards." I called David immediately. "I need a lawyer who isn't afraid of Richard Ashford." "Dad, I'll represent you myself." "No. You just started your career. I won't let them destroy you too." The lawyer I hired cost $700 an hour. By week 3, my savings were evaporating. By month 2, the brownstone went into foreclosure. The legal bills were crushing me, and we were no closer to proving my innocence. Richard Ashford had an army of attorneys, and they buried us in motions and depositions. "William, I hate to say this," my lawyer finally admitted, "but Ashford has done this before. 4 other architects and contractors who competed with him ended up with similar accusations over the past decade. None of them could prove their innocence. The system is rigged when you're fighting someone with unlimited resources. So, I'm just supposed to give up? I'm saying you're David fighting Goliath, and Goliath owns all the stones." I sold everything. The brownstone, my car, my father's watch my mother had given me on my 40th birthday. David tried to give me money, but I refused. Jennifer offered to postpone her wedding and use the savings, but I'd rather have died than let her sacrifice her happiness for Richard's lies. The superintendent job at a low-income apartment complex in Mattapan was the only work I could find. The owner, Mrs. Santos, was old school. You show up, you work hard, you get paid. I don't care what the papers say. Being a handyman at 62 was a special kind of humiliation. My first call was to fix a toilet in a building I designed 15 years ago. The second was at a property where my former intern now worked as the project manager. She looked away when she saw me, embarrassed. The third was at a coffee shop where Caroline and her society friends were having lunch. One of them recognized me and loudly said, "Isn't that the corrupt architect? I heard he's doing maintenance work now." 3 months into this new life, I'd stopped fighting. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. I fixed toilets, painted walls, replaced light bulbs, and lived in a 400-square-foot studio that smelled like mildew. The man who designed award-winning buildings now worried about whether he could afford groceries. That October afternoon, driving to the Beacon Hill building to fix Mr. Harrison's faucet, I thought I'd accepted my fate. I was nobody, just like Caroline said. I had no idea that in 10 minutes, Patrick Harrison would change everything. Patrick's lawyers confirmed everything within a week. Catherine Morrison from Morrison, White, and Associates worked around the clock with her team, verifying documents, establishing my inheritance, and most importantly, reviewing every single lease agreement on Chen Harrison Development Group properties. "Mr. Chen," Catherine said, adjusting her glasses as we sat in her downtown office, "you don't just own the land under Ashford Properties, you own the leverage to destroy him completely. His entire operation depends on the Ashford Tower location. Moving his headquarters would cost him over $100 million and take 2 years. His investors would revolt." "How soon can we act?" I asked. "We already have. I've filed the paperwork establishing your ownership and sent formal notice that you'll be personally reviewing all lease renewals. Mr. Ashford's attorneys have been calling non-stop since this morning." My phone buzzed. "Caroline." I let it ring. The next morning I sat in my old Honda outside the Ashford Tower, holding the folder that contained Richard's future. The building towered above me, 60 stories of glass and steel, built on my father's dream. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "William." Caroline's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Richard's losing his mind about some lease issue. His lawyers are saying something about ownership changes. You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" "Actually, I would," I said, watching Richard's Bentley pull into his reserved spot. "Tell Richard his new landlord wants to discuss his recent business practices. Meeting is in 30 minutes. Conference room A." "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" "Oh, and Caroline? That boring architect you left? He owns the ground your penthouse sits on. Everything Richard built you. It's all on Chen Harrison land." The silence was beautiful. Then came the shriek. "That's impossible. You fixed toilets." "Not anymore. See you in the conference room." I walked through the lobby in my best suit, the one I'd saved from my old life. Catherine Morrison's team swept in behind me, 8 lawyers in perfect formation. "We're here for the emergency meeting with Mr. Ashford," Catherine announced to the receptionist, conference room A. The elevator ride to the 60th floor felt like ascending to justice. When we entered the conference room, Richard was already there with his legal team, 15 lawyers arranged like a defensive wall. Caroline sat beside him, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. "Hello, Richard," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for meeting with your landlord." Richard's face went from confused to furious to terrified in 3 seconds. "This is some kind of joke." Catherine slid the ownership documents across the polished table. "No joke, Mr. Ashford. Mr. Chen inherited 50% of Chen Harrison Development Group from his late father, Michael Chen. Last week, Patrick Harrison transferred his remaining 50% to William. As of now, Mr. Chen owns 100% of the company, including Lot 23, where the Ashford Tower stands. "You can't do this," Richard snarled. "We have a lease, which expires in 60 days, I said calmly, and contains a comprehensive ethics clause. "Catherine, would you share what our investigators found?" Catherine opened her laptop. "We've located 4 architects and contractors over the past decade who were accused of code violations, bribery, and corruption by Ashford Properties. Each one was later blacklisted from the industry. Each one was a competitor who'd underbid Ashford on major contracts. We have a forensic accountant's report showing that the shell companies used to make the bribery payments trace back to accounts controlled by Ashford Properties. We have testimony from the 2 inspectors who've agreed to recant their statements in exchange for immunity." "You can't prove any of this," Richard said, but his voice cracked. "We don't have to prove it in court," I said. "The ethics clause doesn't require conviction, just credible evidence of fraudulent or unethical business practices. But here's my offer, Richard." I stood, looking down at the man who'd destroyed my life for sport. "You have 2 choices. Option 1. You vacate the premises in 60 days. Move your headquarters elsewhere. Good luck finding 60 floors of Class A office space with your custom build-out requirements. Your investors will love the 2-year relocation timeline. Or..." His face was white. "Option 2. You publicly clear my name. Full-page ad in the Globe, press conference, the works. You pay $8 million to each of the 4 architects and contractors you destroyed. You restore my architecture license and reputation. You pay me $40 million in damages, and you sign a new lease at triple the current rate." "That's extortion," one of his attorneys said. "That's business," Catherine corrected. The same kind of hardball tactics Mr. Ashford has used for years. Except this time, he's not holding all the cards. Oh, I added, and you divorce Caroline immediately. Every month you remain married to her, the rent doubles. Month 1, 12 million. Month 2, 24 million. Month 3, 48 million. How long before your board decides she's not worth the cost? Caroline was standing now, backing toward the door. William, baby, we can work this out. I never meant for things to go this far. Save it, I said, not even looking at her. Richard, you have 24 hours to decide. After that, I start eviction proceedings and release everything to the media. Richard's lead attorney whispered urgently in his ear. The color continued draining from his face as he realized his empire stood on my land, and I controlled his fate. This is blackmail, he tried one more time. No, I said quietly. This is what happens when you destroy people for sport, and one of them turns out to own your foundation. You have 24 hours. I turned to leave, then stopped. By the way, Richard, that text Caroline sent about me being nobody? Thank her for me. It kept me going through those 6 months of fixing toilets. Motivation is a powerful thing. Richard chose to fight. He lost spectacularly. Within 48 hours of our meeting, his board of directors called an emergency session. Catherine had made sure they received copies of every sworn affidavit, every piece of forensic evidence, every documented case of Richard's systematic destruction of competitors. The Boston Globe got an anonymous tip, and suddenly Richard Ashford wasn't the brilliant developer anymore. He was the billionaire who destroyed innocent professionals to eliminate competition. The board gave him 2 options: resign or be fired publicly with cause. He slunk away with whatever dignity remained, and the divorce papers were filed within a week. Turns out when your empire is collapsing and the money disappears, so does the marriage. Caroline sent dozens of texts, each more desperate than the last. William, please. I made a mistake. We were married for 18 years. Doesn't that count for something? I'm going to be homeless. Is that what you want? Please answer me. I know you're reading these. She even showed up at the apartment building one night. I was leaving for an evening call when I found her standing in the lobby, looking nothing like the woman who destroyed me 6 months ago. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by normal department store clothing. The diamonds were absent. William, she said, her voice breaking. Please. Just 5 minutes. Mrs. Santos has a clogged drain on the 4th floor, I said, walking past her to the stairs. Have a good evening. I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry for everything. I stopped and turned. No, Caroline. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the money's gone. You're sorry you backed the wrong horse. That's not the same as being sorry for what you did. She threw her purse at me and left. It was the last time I saw her. The 4 architects and contractors Richard had destroyed each received $8 million from the settlement fund we established. Marcus Williams, who'd been forced out 6 years earlier on false charges, cried when he got the call. William, you didn't just save yourself. You saved all of us. You proved we were innocent. Patrick Harrison passed away peacefully 3 months after our reunion, with me holding his hand. Your father would be so proud, he whispered. You didn't just reclaim your wealth. You reclaimed his vision of what development should be. We held the funeral at the church in Dorchester, and over 300 people came. Contractors, workers, families from the buildings we owned. They all had stories about how Patrick had been fair, how he'd given second chances, how he'd believed business should serve communities. I converted 12 of our residential buildings into affordable housing for displaced workers and families. The Chen Harrison Foundation launched with a $100 million endowment, specifically helping professionals who'd been falsely accused of crimes and couldn't afford to clear their names. In the first year alone, we helped 97 people reclaim their careers. Jennifer got married debt-free in a beautiful ceremony at the Fairmont. I walked her down the aisle, and when she hugged me at the altar, she whispered, "Thank you for never giving up, Dad. You taught me that falling down doesn't define you." David started his own legal practice, specializing in defending professionals against corporate retaliation. His first 3 cases were pro bono, defending people Richard had destroyed. We won all three. My grandson Michael, Jennifer's newborn son, carries my father's name. He'll grow up in a world where his family name means something, not because of money, but because when we got power, we used it to protect people who didn't have any. Standing in my father's old office, now mine, in the Chen Harrison Development Group headquarters, I looked at the photograph Patrick had shown me that first day. My father at 26, standing at a construction site, full of dreams. He'd died, thinking he'd left us nothing. He never knew he'd built an empire. But, more importantly, he'd built it with integrity, with clauses demanding ethical behavior, with a vision that business should lift communities up, not tear them down. The best revenge wasn't the money or the power. It wasn't watching Richard lose his company or Caroline's desperate texts. The best revenge was the photo I sent Caroline on what would have been her first anniversary with Richard. It showed me handing keys to Elena Rodriguez, a single mother and former contractor Richard had destroyed, as she moved into her new affordable apartment in our housing complex. The message read, "This is what being somebody looks like." She never responded, but Michael Chen's son didn't need her to. I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes being nobody is just the universe's way of preparing you to become somebody who matters. And sometimes the ground beneath your feet isn't pulling you down. It's just getting ready to lift you higher than you ever imagined. My father left me more than $400 million. He left me purpose. He left me the understanding that wealth without ethics is just paper, but wealth with integrity can change the world, and that's worth more than any dollar amount could ever be. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that justice still exists. Comment below if you've ever faced injustice and came out stronger on the other side. And don't forget